you've gotten a lot farther than you should have. But then you haven't met Frank Horrigan either. Your ride's over, Mutie. Time to die.
In the wasteland, some names carry weight, others carry fear. Frank Horrigan carries both. At nearly 12 feet tall and clad in a heavily modified suit of power armour, he towers over almost every creature in the post-war world. His strength borders on absurd. Deathclaws, one of the wasteland's most dangerous predators, can be torn apart by his hands alone. To most people, Horrigan is not a soldier, or even a person. He is a mutated weapon the Enclave unleashes when overwhelming force is required. But Frank Horrigan was not born this way. Long before the mutations and the armour, there was a man. Understanding how that man became the Enclave's most terrifying weapon means looking back to the beginning. Frank Horrigan was born in 2211. He was not known for his intelligence, but he spoke well enough and carried himself with confidence. What truly defined him, however, was his devotion to the Enclave. He believed completely in the organization's mission and its vision for the future of humanity. That unwavering loyalty quickly made him valuable to his superiors. Over time, Frank worked his way through the ranks until he eventually reached a prestigious assignment within the Enclave's Secret Service. For someone barely in his 20s, it was an extraordinary achievement, but Frank's promising career would not last. At some point during his service, he suffered a severe psychological episode. The details of the incident remain unknown, but whatever happened was serious enough that the Enclave immediately removed him from his post. Rather than discharge him, they reassigned him to a far less visible role in wasteland operations. In effect, Frank was sent somewhere he could still be useful without standing too close to the center of power. Frank soon found himself participating in one of the Enclave's more secretive projects, the excavation of the ruined Mariposa military base in California. The Enclave believed valuable research materials were still buried beneath the destroyed facility, particularly the vats that once contained the forced evolutionary virus, better known as FEV. To reach them, the Enclave needed labor. Teams led by soldiers like Horrigan began raiding nearby settlements. People were taken from places like Redding and Broken Hills and forced into slavery. Their task was simple: dig through the rubble of Mariposa until the buried laboratories were exposed. For the captives, it was brutal work under armed supervision. For Frank, it was just another order. Eventually, the digging reached its target, the ruins of the base were opened, and the long-buried vats of FEV were exposed. But there was a problem. Decades earlier, during the destruction of Mariposa, the Vault Dweller had damaged the containment systems holding the virus. Over the 70 years that followed, the unstable FEV had slowly leaked and degraded underground. When the Enclave excavation teams broke through the facility, the virus escaped. The slaves were the first to suffer the effects, mutating rapidly as the virus spread through their bodies. Frank Horrigan was exposed as well. Unlike the enslaved workers, Frank was not left to die. Instead, the Enclave transported him back to their headquarters aboard a pre-war Poseidon oil rig in the Pacific Ocean, now known as Control Station Enclave. The Enclave were not interested in curing Frank. What interested them was the opportunity to observe the mutation up close. For the next 2 years, Horrigan became the subject of extensive experimentation conducted by the Enclave's chemical core. To keep Horrigan under control, the scientists kept him heavily sedated for much of the process. Even then, the situation was dangerous. On the few occasions he regained consciousness, he reacted with uncontrollable violence. Several researchers reportedly died during these outbursts. Meanwhile, the mutation continued, and the scientists didn't just observe his transformation, they started to influence it. Through repeated surgeries and modified FEV injections, they altered the process, pushing Horrigan's mutation far beyond what normally occurred in the wasteland. By the end of the experiments, the man who entered Mariposa had become something new entirely. He was larger than any known super mutant in California and vastly more powerful. In many ways, he resembled what would later be known as a behemoth. Once the experiments were complete, the Enclave faced a decision. Frank Horrigan was incredibly dangerous. He was prone to violent outbursts and difficult to control. Keeping him contained indefinitely would be costly, but he was also incredibly useful. Rather than disposing of him, the Enclave chose to turn him into a weapon. Before sending him back into the field, they needed to ensure his loyalty remained intact. Scientists implemented a series of psychological conditioning programs designed to reinforce Frank's devotion to the Enclave and its leadership, brainwashing him into becoming the most loyal puppet the Enclave had ever seen. With his loyalty secured, attention shifted to keeping his mutated body stable. To achieve this, Enclave engineers designed a unique suit of power armour built specifically for Horrigan's massive frame. The armour was not simply worn, it was integrated directly into his body, functioning almost like a life support system, which it effectively was. The suit continuously delivered stabilizing chemicals and performance-enhancing compounds that allowed Horrigan to operate at maximum strength without collapsing under the strain. The result was a walking fortress. Armed with a hardened composite blade and a powerful plasma cannon, Frank Horrigan became one of the most dangerous assets the Enclave had ever created. Despite his mutations, Frank did not view himself as a mutant. The Enclave despised mutants, considering them inferior and unfit to survive in the New World. Accepting that label would have meant accepting he was a part of the very thing the Enclave sought to destroy, to wipe clean. But that was something Frank couldn't accept. Instead, he saw himself as a soldier serving a greater cause. Still, the scientists who created him regarded him as little more than an experiment, and many Enclave soldiers viewed him as a cybernetic monstrosity, although they were unwilling to speak openly about it, especially within earshot of the 12-foot giant, who was known for his violence. And it was that violence that led to most troops avoiding Frank entirely. Yet a small number of them did join him on missions. Some even treated him with a strange sense of normality, joking with him or speaking casually as though the man they once knew was still present beneath the armor. Whether Frank understood those interactions is another question entirely. As an Enclave operative, Horrigan quickly developed a reputation for brutal efficiency. He carried out orders without hesitation and showed no interest in the moral consequences of his actions. To his commanders, this made him the perfect soldier. During one mission, he hunted down a man suspected of deserting the Enclave. When he found his target, Frank gave him a chance to come back to the Enclave, and when he refused, he was executed, and the man's wife and child were also killed as well. Another mission took him to Vault 13, where a group of intelligent Deathclaws, living alongside humans no less, had formed a small society. If any creatures in the wasteland might have understood the suffering Frank had endured at the hands of the Enclave, it was these Deathclaws. Instead, he killed their leader with a single punch, and destroyed the rest, because that is what he was told to do. He also confronted the Brotherhood of Steel in San Francisco while retrieving stolen vertibird plans. When a Brotherhood member named Matthew attempted to fight back, Horrigan laughed at the efforts before killing him with his signature move, one punch. Afterward, having taken another life, the only thing Frank noticed was that it was after lunch, a moment that perfectly illustrates how far removed he has become from ordinary human behavior. Luckily, his career as the Enclave's ultimate weapon came to an end during the events surrounding the destruction of the Poseidon oil rig. The Chosen One from Arroyo, a descendant of the Vault Dweller, infiltrated the Enclave's headquarters and began sabotaging the facility from within, triggering a meltdown and leaving little time to escape to safety. As the situation deteriorated, Horrigan and several Enclave soldiers secured the exit, ensuring no one could escape. When the Chosen One reached him, there was no avoiding a confrontation. Attempts were made to reason with Horrigan, Some accounts claim the Chosen One even persuaded Sergeant Granite and his squad to turn against Frank. Whether that version of events is accurate remains debated, but I like to think it happened. What is certain is that Frank refused to stand down. Years of conditioning and indoctrination had convinced him that the Enclave represented humanity's future. In his eyes, the hodgepodge of enemies before him, a tribal, mutant, cyberdog, a Deathclaw, and potentially some traitors too, were nothing more than filth that needed to be removed. They were all mutants in their own ways, closer to his own self than he ever realized or even considered. The battle that followed was brutal, but with their collective strength and the additional support of 4 plasma turrets, the giant was defeated. During the fight, Horrigan's armour suffered catastrophic damage. The suit that kept his mutated body stable began to fail, and without it, he could not survive. Despite this, Horrigan continued fighting until he was finally torn apart by the damage inflicted during the confrontation. His armour tore him to pieces, and even then, he managed one final act. Before dying, Frank activated the oil rig's self-destruct sequence, cutting their time to escape in half and taunting his opponents with his final breath.
You haven't won here. You and your muty bastard friends are gonna join me in a big ol' mushroom cloud send-off. I just triggered the self-destruct. The work will go on. You didn't do nothing here except seal your own death warrants. Duty. Honor. Courage. Semper Fi.
Frank's remains were incinerated, and his enemies survived. Frank Horrigan's final words were Semper Fi, short for Semper Fidelis, a Latin phrase meaning always faithful. And in many ways, those words perfectly summarized his life. From the beginning, Frank believed completely in the Enclave and everything it represented. His loyalty survived years of painful experimentation, brutal conditioning, and physical transformation, and not once did he ever question the cause he served. Yet there is a certain irony in his story, because the Enclave despised mutants above all else. Yet their ultimate soldier had become the very thing they hated most. And while they used him as a weapon, it is difficult to believe they would have kept him around forever. Eventually, someone this powerful and unstable becomes a liability. And I bet there was a plan to remove Frank from the land of the living the very moment he lost control. A signal to flood his system to knock him out, or some kind of failsafe to switch his suit off and kill him. Maybe something like that was already in place, but was never used. In any case, considering how effective he was, it is surprising the Enclave never produced more soldiers like him. The Enclave has experimented with FEV many times, both before and after Horrigan. It is entirely possible that somewhere, in another lab or hidden facility, new strains are being tested. Maybe the Enclave are searching for ways to destroy mutants more efficiently, or maybe they are attempting to create something even stronger than Frank Horrigan. The Enclave has never hesitated to turn dangerous technology and humans into weapons for their own use. And if history is any indication, the wasteland is cyclical, and one day we will see another monster similar to Frank Horrigan.